Joining us is Odyssey NFL insider Ross Tucker. Insider calls presented by BetQL. Download the free BetQL app right now and get instant access to the industry's most advanced suite of sports betting tools right at your fingertips. Ross, John Dickinson in for Steiny here on this Tuesday. Goo is here.
Ross.
And thanks for joining us. Looking forward to another season.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Great to be back with you guys again this year. Just picked up my daughters from school. They are thrilled that instead of talking with them about their day, that I get to talk some Niners football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
We got to start with what we've spent the bulk of the show talking about, which is, of course, Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, and the Niners inserting Garoppolo back into the conversation last week as the backup. Now, there was the report from Albert Breer that Trey Lance was annoyed at the 49ers keeping Jimmy, but just from a mentality standpoint, how do you handle what couldn't have been just, all roses when you first hear it, even if they give you a heads up relatively quickly if you're Trey Lance?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I've never been in that situation, that exact situation, but I do know what it's like to have another guy that is a threat to your starting job, and make no bones about it, that's exactly what Jimmy G is. I mean, as long as Jimmy G is there's a chance he could be put into the game. There's a chance that if things go poorly for Trey Lance, that they could change their mind and go with Jimmy because they have a very good roster around him. That's not the case if it's Nate Sudfeld. It's just not, right? And I think Trey Lance knows that. I think Trey Lance doesn't like that the longtime starter who took the team to a Super Bowl, took the team last year to an NFC Championship game, is still there. I don't care what he says publicly. I don't believe him at all. I do believe Breer's report. Now, that said, if you're Trey Lance, you got to overcome it anyway. Right, you got to go out there, and if having Jimmy G over your shoulder causes you to play poorly, then maybe you weren't the right guy in the first place.
Man, I don't think truer words have been spoken, Ross. And JD and I have been going 15 rounds back and forth about this Niner team because everywhere you look, and I get it, they were in the NFC Championship game last year, should have beat the Rams, in my opinion. People are picking the Niners to be a problem, like one of the Final Four team. Ross, let's talk about the position you mastered. The Niners O-line outside of Trent Williams, to me, might be their weakest unknown going into this season. How can a team have those aspirations, but we don't know what to make of the O-line? Talk to us about your thoughts on the Niner O-line.
Yeah, it's a fair critique, right? I mean, they've got a major question mark at quarterback and a question mark, a couple of them on the offensive line. That's not usually a really good combo. It really isn't. Now, I've told you guys this before, having talked with a bunch of guys that played O-line in the Niners offense, in the Shanahan-style offense, they do think it's an offense that is conducive to young offensive linemen being able to play as long as they know the system. And so I think those guys will be okay. I don't know that they'll excel, but I think that they'll be okay just because a lot of the things that they ask you to do in that offense with the bootlegs, with some of the quarterback run stuff I think they'll do, they actually a lot of times put the offensive line in a really good position.
Ross, yeah, and that's along the lines of kind of what I wanted to get at. How much can Kyle Shanahan, we hear it all the time, scheme up to protect, Trey Lance, but also protect some of those guys in particular on the interior? The other debate that we always get into is, how different is the offense going to look with Trey Lance at quarterback? It's the same offense, but there's going to be a different look to it. How do you think the Niners offense will be different with Trey Lance?
Yeah, I'm fascinated because when I think of Kyle Shanahan and that offense, the guys that come to mind for me are like Matt Schaub, Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan. He's had success with guys that are not exactly fleet of foot. You know, I mean, these are not guys that were running threats. They could move enough that they could run the bootleg action and some of the nakeds and stuff that the Shanahan offense likes so much. But he's never really had this guy. You know, theoretically, this would be perfect because now on those bootlegs and some of those naked boots, you got a guy that is actually able to press the edge. You got a guy that if there's nobody there, he's not just going to throw the ball out there. He can actually go. I mean, he can actually run and hit the edge and get some significant yardage. I go back to RG3 and RG3's rookie year when he was Rookie of the Year in the NFL, and it tells me that Shanahan is very good at being able to identify, hey, what does this guy do well? How can we put him in a position to succeed? And that's really what I expect him to do with Trey Lance. I think you will see a couple of designed quarterback runs. I think you will see a couple of RPOs, but they'll still have the same foundation of the outside zones, the bootleg, and the play action.
Ross, I'm looking at the Niners division, and maybe it's just me. I'm a worrier. I'm concerned about Stafford's elbow and what's going on there if he has to miss time. And then I'm looking at Tampa Bay, who I could see playing the Niners if things go right in the NFC Championship game. Can you share with us what you've thought about Brady leaving, the injuries to the O-line? Now some may be back for Sunday night's game against Dallas. What are your thoughts on Tom Brady and the Bucks?
Well, let's start with Brady. You know, I've talked about him a lot, former teammate of mine. I don't think it's a real good look. You know, I don't know what's going on. I mean, on the one hand, as a former player, I think it's amazing that he evidently, I mean, imagine having that much clout as a player, being that accomplished, that you can just, like, take a 10-day vacation during training camp. I mean, that is unbelievable that he was able to pull that off. The flip side, though, is, you know, I always talk about him being all in. I always talk about how committed he is. They've got some new receivers, Julio Jones, Russell Gage. They've got a new rookie left guard. They got a new center that's never played center before. I don't think it's a real good look for Brady that he missed all that time, and you know, I at all. And I'm not afraid to say it. You know, I think that that's a real negative for him and for them. I still think they'll be good. I still think he'll be good, but that's the thing about this season for the Niners or the Eagles or the Saints. You know, I think the consensus top three teams, the Rams, the Bucks, the Packers, they all kind of have flaws. I mean, this is a great year for a team that's not considered one of the favorites to go on a run.
Ross, along those lines, and so much of it for the 49ers is going to be what we've been talking about, but for you, as you look at the season on the brink of beginning, what would it take for you, Ross Tucker, to make a switch at quarterback if you're the Niners? Is it you have to lose and the quarterback, talking about Trey Lance, isn't at a certain level? Do you do it even if you're winning? Like, how do you navigate or thread the needle between developing and winning?
Well, it's a great question, and it is threading a needle. I don't think you do it at all if they're winning. I think the only possible combo to do it is if they're losing and he's playing poorly. But I think in a 17-game slate where 7 teams make the playoffs, I do think that they're going to try to have a pretty long leash for Lance, especially knowing, you know, just how little he's played. Basically 1 year of college football and a couple games last year.
Goo?
Wow, that's heavy. I'm with you. Now, listen, did you think Jimmy was done? Were you shocked because, you know, we found out he had to go under the knife, Ross? I mean, how were you? Because we didn't talk to you. I was blown away that there were no suitors. Then I was like, you know what, JD, I understand. Nobody, you know, he wasn't Tom Brady or Joe Montana on his best day. But the fact that he's here, if that bothers your prize rookie, are you one of those that, you know, subscribe to the theory, well, he wasn't the guy anyway? I'm like, he's human. He was told this guy wasn't going to be around. How would you deal with it?
Yeah, well, on the Jimmy side of it, I do think it's surprising that he's still there. I think the most interesting aspect of it is probably that Jimmy was willing to do it, because it makes perfect sense to me from a Niners perspective. They're still probably hoping that one of these quarterbacks gets hurt and that they're able to trade Jimmy and get a decent amount of return for him. But for Jimmy, he could have just forced their hand and forced them to cut him. And then he could have been a free agent.
Yeah, and I think that is the biggest surprise in all of this, is the fact that maybe he wasn't a little bit more vengeful. Maybe he wasn't a little bit more just done with the whole process. It also makes me wonder, Ross, and we'll close it on this note, does he think that his best opportunity to play and to look good is here? And what does that say?
I think he wanted to lock in the $6.5 million, and I think he wanted to be on a team to start the year, and in his mind, he either won't play or he'll play for a Niners team he's very familiar with, or he'll get traded somewhere where he can start, and if he wants to go there. He might not want to go to some bad team. Trevor Lawrence gets hurt in Jacksonville. I don't know if Jimmy G says yes to that trade. I mean, he probably does for the chance to play, but I think a year out and a year of just him healing, I think there already will be a pretty robust market for him. So he might not go somewhere unless it's a good situation for him.
Ross, great stuff.
Thanks,
as
man.
always. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. See you guys.
All right, Odyssey NFL insider Ross Tucker. Insider Calls presented by BetQL. Download the free BetQL app right now and get instant access to the industry's most advanced suite of sports betting tools right at your fingertips.
Now,